the osteoblasts and osteoclasts. So the osteoclast, clast means break. So what they're doing is breaking down the bone. So the osteoclasts are breaking down the bone or reabsorbing. Like if the body needs more calcium, the osteoclasts are going to break down the bone to release calcium into the bloodstream. Whereas osteoblasts are going to form the bone formation. They produce the osteoid, which is formed of collagen fibers, and eventually it's going to lay down minerals too. And then we'll talk, a lot of times we talk about cells that end in the word blast, like fibroblasts, different things like that. Those are the younger, immature forms of the cells. So the osteoblasts, eventually, when they mature, they become osteocytes. Fibroblasts become fibrocytes. Okay? Okay, so then, like I say, the osteoblasts are going to lay down the bone, and they're going to also mineralize the osteoid. And then osteoclasts are what breaks down the bone. And that's, when you're breaking down bone, it's called bone reabsorption, or resorption. And then osteocytes are star-shaped cells, and those are the ones that are going to be the mature cells in the bone. And we'll be showing some pictures of the osteocytes. Basically, it's what they do is they secrete the osteoid or the bone tissue around themselves, and they just become trapped in their own little space.
Everyone sign up on a list.
Yeah, so make sure you need to sign up on the roll sheet, and then the other thing is for extra credit. And like I mentioned, it's better to sign up and then you can change your mind. Say, I don't want to do the extra credit rather than to try to get added on later. All right, so we talked about bones. Now we're going to talk about short bones or flat bones or regular bones. Basically, those are going to be flat plates of bone filled with a spongy bone on the inside. So there'll be a little layer of the compact bone on the outside, and then it's spongy bone on the inside. So it's basically kind of like a sandwich, right? You got the two pieces of bread and the compact bone, and then the spongy bone on the inside is the inside of the sandwich. And they don't have a diaphysis and epiphysis. And then this bone marrow is going to be on the inside. So now we talked about there's a difference between the red bone marrow and the yellow bone marrow. Okay? The red bone marrow is when it's going to be what's called hematopoietic tissue, which means tissue that forms blood cells. So all these spots on here where you see this red area here, those are going to be the blood-forming cells. In an infant, a larger amount of blood-forming or red bone marrow, whereas in the adult, it's going to restrict to different areas. So you're going to find them in the head of the femur, the humerus, the sternum, part of the ribs, somewhat into the spine and the pelvis. So if you've heard of people having like bone marrow transplants, if they're going to harvest bone marrow from somebody to help somebody with a blood disease, they're going to be going into the pelvis, femur, things like that, sternum. All right, now we're going to get into the microscopic structure of the bone, the compact bone. All right, so remember, the compact bone is the bone that's more dense. And it's made up of a building block unit, which is called either the osteon or the Haversian system. So that's the structural unit of the bone. But basically, it's concentric circles and rings, and those rings form long tubes, and they stack up next to each other. And then on that Haversian, or the osteon or the Haversian system, you're going to have a central canal. And then you'll have the lamella, which are layers. Lamella are these layers. So it's like an onion, you know, there's different layers of skin that's around the center. And then the central canal is where the blood vessels are going to go. And then you have Volkmann canals, and those are things that go at right angles. So some of the nutrient vessels can traverse through that. So those are, they have the nerve supply and the blood supply. So the blood vessels and the nerves are going to go through those little canals, either the vertical long ones at the center of the osteon, or the Volkmann's canals that go perpendicular. And then, as we mentioned before, you have the osteocytes, which is the mature cells. And then what's the precursor to the osteocyte? What's the immature? Osteoblast, right? So the osteocytes are what lays down the bone. And then what's the cell that reabsorbs bone? Osteoclasts, right? So then you have the lacuna. Remember how I was saying that the osteocytes, they secrete bone tissue all around themselves, and then all of a sudden they're enclosed. That space that they sit in is called the lacunae. And we'll have some pictures of this stuff up in a minute. And the canaliculi are the small canals, and those are what connect the different lacunae together. And then again, like I mentioned, the yellow bone marrow is the marrow cavity that you have inside of the long bones. And it's not going to be generating blood cells, it's going to be more fatty tissue. So here are some pictures. These are the ones right out of the textbook here. Where, what's this cell right here? The osteocyte. And then what's the space that it's surrounded into? The space that is the lacunae, right? And then these little things that go between the two are the canaliculi. And then here's the central canal of the Herbertian canal, the central canal of the osteon, which are these things here. And you can see that that's where the blood vessels, the arteries, veins, and nerves are going to go through. So what part of bone is this right here? Compact bone, and then this is spongy bone here. And then what's this membrane on the outside? The periosteum, right? And how many layers does that have? 2 layers. One's more just connective tissue, and the other side is the osteogenic layer, and that's where it's going to have the, what kind of cell? Osteoblasts. So then these are the concentric rings. Those are called the lamellae. Right? So it's just like I said, like an onion. You have rings, they're smaller in the inside, they get bigger as they go out. And in between those lamella, you have the osteocytes. And then you put a bunch of those osteons or Herbertian canal systems together, and that's going to form the compact bone. So here's more of a microscopic view. And this whole thing together right here is one of the osteons or the Herbertian canals. Remember, those are long tubes going up and down the bone. And then you have the osteocytes in there with the canaliculi and the lamellae. And then this is the central canal here. And then what do you have in the central canal again? The blood vessels and nerves. So again, just to review the different kinds of cells that you have. The osteoblasts are the immature form, the bone-forming cells, and they mature and become osteocytes. And then you have the osteoclasts, and those are the ones that break down the bone. They're like little Pac-Mans going around in your bones, chomping down on it. And then you have the osteoid, which is unmineralized bone, and it's composed of proteoglycans, glycoproteins, and collagen. And then you add the mineral matrix to that, and then that's what you get bone, get the calcium